and welcome to the programme. I'm Nima Abuarte. 4 years ago, Dubai's lofty ambitions came crashing down. Unable to pay its debt, it was bailed out by its rich neighbour, Abu Dhabi. But Dubai still owes over $100 billion worth of debt. And so this week we're asking whether the negotiations to restructure this debt are getting easier and restoring faith in Dubai once again. Also coming up this week, tall ambitions. Construction in Saudi Arabia is booming, but it's not enough to avert a housing crisis.
There are currently estimates that Saudi Arabia needs to build 1,000 houses a day for the next 10 years in order to meet the demand for housing.
Sewage Stories. Is Dubai bagging up profits from its human waste? And browsing for clothes. Can a website bring Lebanese fashion to a wider audience? But first, Saudi Arabia's construction industry is booming. But while smart Dubai-style skyscrapers are going up in big cities, the country is also facing a growing housing crisis, as Katie Watson now reports from the capital, Riyadh.
These days, construction workers are pretty busy here in Saudi. Riyadh's skyline is changing fast. All along the main highway, which cuts through the middle of the capital, buildings are going up. On the right, a new financial district. This country has big ambitions, and there's big money to be made in construction too. Analysts say it'll be the fastest growing sector in the Saudi economy in the coming years. But why? Well, it's a simple question of demand and supply. The population here in Saudi has quadrupled in the past 40 years. There simply isn't enough housing to keep up with demand. And while construction companies keep building, those who own the land on which the skyscrapers are being built are cashing in too.
People don't speculate in houses, people don't speculate in apartments. What people do speculate in is land. So it's probably the Saudis' favorite asset allocation is the land market, because uniquely in the world there's no land tax, there's no capital gains tax, and the price of it's always going up because the cities have always been growing. So for the past 30 years, nobody's ever lost money in land. They've lost money in stocks, they've lost money in currencies, they've lost money in a lot of other things. But land here is considered almost a sure bet, and that's their favorite allocation.
But while that's benefited Saudi families who bought or been given land, it's made it much more difficult for the less well-off. With much of Saudi's prime land in cities in private hands, there's little scope for developers to buy and build low-cost homes to cater for the majority.
If we say 80% of the market cannot afford real prices per square meters of the market. So you can see most of developers, such as us and others, we are focusing only to produce the products or to construct a product that meet the 20% of the demand. So you still have opportunities with 80%, but the problem is still with the cost structure, land, construction, with income of local, it's not yet matching or is not yet workable.
But there is some hope. Conscious of the divide between the haves and the have-nots, King Abdullah announced huge social spending programmes in the wake of the Arab Spring. One of those was a housing scheme worth nearly $70 billion. The aim was to build 500,000 homes over the coming years, but is it enough?
To begin with, 500,000 houses isn't going to solve the shortage of affordable housing in Saudi Arabia. There are currently estimates that Saudi Arabia needs to build 1,000 houses a day for the next 10 years in order to meet the demand for housing. That demand is prospective, i.e. people coming into the country. The population is expected to grow by 1/3 over the next decade. That's an extra 10 million people roughly. But it's also demand coming from those who currently live with their parents or living in substandard accommodation. And it's very difficult to gauge quite how large that is, but it's certainly well beyond the 500,000 mark. So even if Saudi Arabia were able to build the 500,000, that's a big if, over the next 5 to 10 years, it still would only be partially addressing the problem.
Until then, these luxury apartments will continue to go up to provide for the top end of society. But plenty more Saudis would settle for less, both in height and price, if only more of it existed.
Katie Watson reporting from Saudi Arabia. Now, last week, Dubai Group, an investment company owned by Dubai's ruler and one of the biggest casualties of this Emirates debt crisis, said that an agreement had been reached to restructure $10 billion worth of debt. It's hoped this will mark the end of long drawn-out negotiations. Lenders, which include the Royal Bank of Scotland, had previously rejected other proposals and even brought a court case against the group. Now, if the agreement goes ahead, it resolves one of this Emirate's biggest debt problems. But there's still a long way to go. It's estimated that Dubai has over $100 billion worth of debt, and the next few years are crucial, with $50 billion due between next year and 2016. So how important is this announcement for Dubai Group? That's a question I put to Ahmed Al-Anani from the investment firm Exotics.
It's been a very drawn-out process, and I think the conclusion in the market was, if I'm a lender to Dubai, I would rather be a lender via bonds than be a lender via loans, because I'm most likely gonna get some quite aggressive restructuring terms on if I was a private lender. But the picture is completely different on the bond side. For bondholders, they've been getting their money in full and on time. And the bond market is open with wide arms for Dubai. So I think Dubai is kind of shut the tap from one end but opened it from the other side, so to speak.
And so, providing the deal goes through, does this mean that Dubai is no longer in trouble?
One of the good things that Dubai has actually done over the last few years is that they've managed to extend their maturity profile, push it out as far as they can. But the next few years are going to be rather testing. So we've got that, if you recall, about 5 years ago, the bailout money that came from Abu Dhabi. That's due next year. I think the general consensus in the market is that that's probably going to get extended. But then the year after that, you've got Dubai World. That was a very high-profile restructuring. The first tranche of the Dubai World restructuring comes due in 2015. That's around $4 billion US. We've been seeing some headlines recently in the press about the company not selling assets fast enough to be able to make that payment.
Investors have said in the past that Dubai wants to artificially manipulate market prices by not letting the free market rule when it comes to, say, property prices or whatever else. Is this what they're doing again with their own assets? So they're not putting them out there. They don't want the market to rule. They want to get what they believe it's worth.
I think there is a cultural issue in the Middle East, which is, people are very hesitant to sell their assets below their book value, or what they have book value as, and recognize losses. That's a cultural issue across the Middle East.
But Dubai is in trouble?
Not for the time being, it's not. I don't think so. I think the economy is recovering. A lot of sectors in the economy have certainly recovered, even from trade to tourism and even real estate now. So I think with growth, as long as there's some growth that is underpinning this recovery, I think the market is going to look rather positively on Dubai. But like I said, there's a lot that needs to be done in the next couple of years to show the willingness and the ability to meet these obligations.
And so, just very briefly, what is this new Dubai then, in terms of it being a place for people to invest, and in terms of the way companies are structured and relate to each other? So will there be a domino effect, in other words, if one goes down?
In any other open economy, when an entity goes through a restructuring or is on the verge of default, usually these entities are restructured so that they either come out stronger or they cease to exist. In the case of Dubai, unfortunately, that there's a lot of these entities that there's a lot of question marks why they're even still in existence. They've become effectively zombie entities that are managed liquidations over the X number of years. The role of government and government-related entities is still very heavy in Dubai. But on the flip side of that, if you look at what has happened in the context of the region with the Arab Spring, etc., Dubai has actually really emerged as the safe haven, the only place with infrastructure and a system that people in the region are willing to invest and put their money in. So I think the role of the private sector is going to continue to grow, and probably in the long term that's going to outpace the growth in government-related entities.
Ahmed Al-Anani from the investment firm Exotics speaking to me earlier. Now, the fast pace of development across the Gulf has meant that quite often infrastructure hasn't been able to cope. Just a few years ago here in Dubai, sewage trucks would queue for over a day to dump their filthy load at treatment plants. But now companies are developing their own technology and even exporting it. So how have things improved? Jonathan Fruin has this report.
Welcome to Dubai's Jebel Ali sewage treatment plant. Now, around 70% of the waste that arrives here comes through the city's network of sewers, but still around 30% is arriving in the sort of tankers that you see behind me, coming from labourer accommodation mostly in the outskirts of the city. Now, it's the start of a process that turns out a number of byproducts, including refined water that helps keep the city's parks and green spaces growing vibrantly.
Potable water in this part of the world is a commodity which is produced and desalinated. The cost to the government is roughly $2 per cubic meter, compared to wastewater which produced from our sewage treatment plant, which is costing roughly $0.50 per cubic meter. This water makes it really economical feasibility to ensure that we have such a wide spread of horticultural and agricultural in the city.
Human waste contains quite a lot of nutrients, and once wastewater has had plastics, wood and other solids removed, it goes through a range of biological and mechanical processes that keep the treatment plant, amazingly, virtually smell-free. The nutrients remain, and whilst not good enough to drink, bacteria and other pathogens have been eradicated from the water. Yet the process wasn't so smooth 5 or so years ago, when there was only one sewage works in Dubai.
Due to the sudden rapid growth of the city, the issues were with the tanker being queued in the long queue. In some occasion they had to wait up to 40 hours. And apart from that, because the plant was overloaded, the final product was not meeting exactly the design requirement, and it was discomfort to the public. We managed to fast-track the project of Jebel Ali sewage treatment plant, and we finally could overcome all these challenges.
But it's not just about centralised sewage treatment in this part of the world. Welcome to a desert jungle. This residential community of about 200 homes has its very own sewage treatment works. And it takes the output from that, mixing it with water from the government plants, and then putting that through a further process to ensure that the water it has here is not going to get clogged up with algae in the extensive waterways. The firm behind the technology that runs that plant is local, and it's been experiencing success, exporting its products.
We've exported into all regions of Middle East, North Africa. We have systems in Nigeria, Ghana. We were asked by the United Nations to deliver systems into Sudan. We have systems in Oman, Yemen. Basically, any area which is a residential area that usually has a septic system or a rural area will look towards a package system as a solution to treat their sewage treatment, just because of ease of installation and also ease of operation.
Back at the main sewage treatment plant, there's another byproduct which might come as a surprise. Sludge that was separated from the incoming water gets baked and dried using methane gas produced during the treatment process. Granules then get bagged and sold to gardeners all across the city as a fertiliser of human origin. A bargain, perhaps, at $2.50 for 25 kilos. In the end, very little to do with wastewater in this part of the world goes to waste.
Jonathan Fruin reporting there. Right, we're going to take a short break now, and when we come back, surfing for style, how online shopping is helping Lebanon's fashion designers. Welcome back to the programme. I'm Nima Abuwarde. Now, credit and debit cards are often far more convenient than cash to pay for everyday items. But the recent news of a $45 million global ATM heist that affected 2 banks in this region makes you wonder just how effective fraud prevention measures are in this part of the world. And it was certainly a talking point at a banking payments conference that was held in Dubai this week. So just how vulnerable is this region? That's a question I put to Brett King, the founder of Movin, a mobile banking service.
So chances of a $45 billion ATM type fraud or some hacking scandal here that results in the loss of millions of credit card details, it's certainly a possibility. But in respect to the fraud that occurs in the region, most of the fraud actually occurs through simple social engineering. So experts who are trying to steal your information, rather than hack through a secure system, it's much easier for me to try and trick you to give you your PIN number, or trick you to give me your user ID and password and use that information. Now there are ways to get around this. The user ID and password system that we've used in internet banking, for example, for the last almost 20 years, this needs to be replaced with something better, maybe biometrics using your fingerprint, or facial recognition with your camera on your phone.
What you're saying sounds fantastic, but it's still about what works within banks, how the banks operate here.
Yeah, but as soon as one bank says we're going to allow you to do this differently, then the other banks follow. Pretty much every bank, every retail bank in the UAE has a mobile banking app now. Now, if we take that attitude, oh well, we're not going to give mobile banking because we're not doing it. There's a lot of competitive pressure.
So, are you saying then that they want to provide services, let's say internet banking, but they still want to get that pound of flesh? It's this trade mentality that isn't going away.
That, and also the service mentality that, well, we're going to give you better service if you come into the branch. So why would you want to use internet banking anyway? There's that sort of view of the world, and then there's the highest adoption in the world of mobile phones here in the UAE. I think it's 240% right now. So you have a massive adoption of new technologies on a consumer basis, but the application of that technology in an area like banking, internet banking is pretty poor here. Most of the internet banking capabilities are 2 to 3 generations behind the best banks elsewhere in the world.
So what's likely to happen here? Will people implement the new technology? Will they bypass bricks and mortar?
One of the interesting things you have here, you have a lot of private equity cash available. So I think that will support startup businesses, entrepreneurs, innovators here who say, let's not stick by the same old rules, let's try something different. Rat Bank has done some
But not when it comes to basic things like getting rid of checks. Here you need to have post-dated checks if you want to rent a house, buy a car, and so on. So
post-dated checks are a disaster for this economy. It increases risk, they're extremely inefficient. There's just nothing positive about them. During the financial crisis, they were responsible for, you have this situation, you bounce a check, you go to jail. 1 in 5 checks during the financial crisis were bouncing because of this post-dated issue. The psychology is it's a benefit to the players in the system, but it's not. It actually increases risk exponentially.
Brett King speaking to me earlier. Now let's see what other business stories are making headlines across the region this week. Qatar has deposited $3 billion into Egypt's central bank to shore up the troubled economy's finances. According to an unnamed central bank official, the funds will remain in the central bank until Egypt's finance ministry issues Qatar with bonds of the same value. Egypt's also negotiating a $4.8 billion loan from the International Monetary Fund, but has so far not come to any agreement. A total of over $61 billion, that's about 12% of all global remittances, came from the Gulf last year. That's according to the latest report from the World Bank on remittances. Nearly $30 billion was sent home by Indian expat workers in the GCC. That's equal to nearly half of all remittances from the Gulf last year. Dubai has to double the number of private schools in the next decade in order to keep up with rising demand, according to a government report. 450,000 students are expected by 2023. That's up from 225,000 today. Now, Lebanon prides itself on being the fashion capital of the Middle East. Homegrown designers like Elie Saab have become global names, and this has encouraged local designers to come forward, but they're finding it hard to make their mark outside of this region, and so help is at hand in the form of a website called Lebitlik, which means suits you in Arabic. We spent a day with the woman behind the site to find out more.
My name is Louise Doumet. I'm 26 years old and I'm the co-founder of Lebitlik.com. Hi Becky, how are you? The idea came 2 years ago while in New York, and I was wearing a white top from a Lebanese designer. A woman came to me and asked me where it was from. Second day, same story, but for earrings this time. So then we started thinking that there might be great interest in Lebanese designers on the international level. A year later, we were online, and 2 years later, here we are selling items to the US, to Russia, to the Middle East, and of course to Lebanon. We have 24 designers on Lebanon. A lot of designers are very well established. Some of them are more known in Lebanon than outside Lebanon, and some of them is actually the other way around. So if you actually look for some jewelry designer, they're much more famous in Japan and nobody has ever heard of them here. The way we work is every time a sale is done, we go to the designer's address, pick up the item in their soft packaging, put it in a Lebanon box, and then have it shipped to the end client. We take a fixed percentage. Designer keep their stock with them, so they like to have it close to them. We don't need a warehouse. It might not sound very efficient to go and pick up every item from every address, but Lebanon is small and Beirut is small. Buying online habits are not very well engraved in people's mind in this region, but I think it will pick up, and I think it is coming. Once people have changed their habits, when people are more used to buying online, then yes, definitely it's a very viable business in my opinion. The internet speed in Lebanon is very slow, one of the slowest in the world. Still, we've managed to work around it. We've always known that it was slow, so we can't actually blame anyone. But then we try to upload the pictures on the website in a way that makes it very easy for people to download. So actually the download time of the website is not that long. So people don't feel it's slow. We're now in Jemaizeh. It's the young and hip arty area of Beirut. It's where a lot of the designers have their boutique and showrooms, and it's where I like to come and walk around to see all the different pretty stuff. Hello, how are you? When we started off, we were selling around 1, 2, or 3 items per week. As time passes, now we sell a few per day. A lot of clients, they see some items they like on the website, they just print the picture and then go to the designer's boutique and say, I want this or that. Now, from the outside, it could be seen as, I wish this didn't happen, or as a bad thing. But I think on the longer term, it could be beneficial for both us and the designers. Mainly, our biggest market is for men, Lebanese men living outside Lebanon, sending gifts to Lebanese women living here. Whether it's wife, sister, girlfriend, ex-girlfriend, it's mainly gifts. Even though they buy less often, but once they bought 2 times, more or less, I can be sure that they're coming again to buy a 3rd time, especially if the woman is happy with it. Now, men, even though they buy less often, they buy much more expensive. I think it's charming that they feel that the more an item is expensive, the happier the woman will be. I just find it touching and charming every time a man sends a gift with a small note. Interesting, charming, and profitable.
Well, that's all from us for this week. I do hope you've enjoyed our programme. Before we go, let's see how the region's main markets performed. And remember, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address is middleeastbiz@bbc.co.uk. And you can go to Twitter and Facebook for latest photos and news from our teams across the world. Now, next week, we're looking at the issue of road safety here in the Gulf. Roads in this part of the world are some of the most dangerous. So what are governments doing to improve standards? And what's the economic cost of ignoring the issue? Until then, from me, Nima Abu Warde, and the rest of the team, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.